I'm glad to see each one of you. It's another great morning, and I'm sure God has a plan for each one of us. And today, even as we gather together, it is good to realize God is doing His work. God is working in our lives. Well, in the midst of all the other challenges, God has been gracious to us, and we are so grateful. And I want to go straight to the word of the Lord. Open with me, if you will, in Matthew 26. I'll read one verse there, and then go to the book of Hebrews. Matthew 26, 28. Matthew 26, verse 28. This is a night that Jesus was arrested, and just before their arrest, when he was doing what we call the Last Supper, these are the words he said. "For this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins." Now, I would like us to go to Hebrews 8, and then from verse 8. Keep that statement in mind as we read Hebrews, because there is something I want to connect there. Hebrews 8, from verse 8. "Because finding fault with them, he says, Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant." I want you to underline that statement, a new covenant. Remember, we have read that statement in Matthew. Now here is the same statement, a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Next verse. "Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they did not continue in my covenant, and I disregarded them, says the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my laws in their mind and write them on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. None of them shall teach his neighbor, and none his brother, saying, Know the Lord. For all shall know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their lawless deeds I will remember no more. In that he says, a new covenant, he has made the first obsolete. Now, what is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to vanish away. Now, I would like us to share from these two portions of Scripture, the subject being understanding the new covenant. Understanding the new covenant. And if you have followed what Scripture says right from Genesis, we all know that God is a God of covenant. Before long, in Genesis, God makes a covenant, that is after the fall of man. When he begins to deal with Noah, that is after the flood, the Bible says he made a covenant with him. You know what is called the covenant of Noah. And then, because it was a bit general. Then after that, the next key thing, according to the Bible, is now what we refer to as the covenant of Abraham. God picked one man, an idol worshiper. I mean, Abraham was not born, if you like, saved. He was not born a Jew. He was born a worshiper of all kinds of idols. Where he came from, they worshipped the sun, the moon, the stars, and everything. In his own wisdom, God picked this one man and made a covenant with him that now we know as the covenant of Abraham. Part of the covenant was, I will bless you. That is him as a person. I will make your name great. And then God added, and this covenant, I will make a covenant with your descendants after you to be their God and that they be my people. That is when now we begin to talk about a nation in the Old Testament that is called by God, that is picked, that is selected from other nations. And we begin to talk about now one particular people called the people of God, and the rest of us, at least in the Old Testament, who are now referred to as Gentiles. When Isaac is born, he comes into the same covenant, and Jacob comes later and becomes now, now the face of that covenant. And that's when the Lord changes his name to Israel. I just want to lay a foundation quickly. And from there onwards, we begin to talk about Israel as the people of God, as opposed to the Moabites, the Amalekites, the Kenyans, the Ugandans, because now we have one nation that has gotten into a covenant with God through their father Abraham, Isaac, and now Israel. And from there, everything in the Old Testament now rotates around this one nation, the people of God, the children of God, whom now we know to be the people God continued to work with until Jesus comes into the picture. And before then, because I want to lay the foundation before now I bring you back to the scriptures, the prophets later began to lament that although God made a covenant with our fathers, it's like that covenant is not working. Right from the time of King David, you begin to see signs of a breakaway. You begin to see signs that things are not working out right. And by the time we now speak about the exile, and a few years before the exile, especially during the time of Prophet Jeremiah and Isaiah, the Lord begins to speak of a future time. And at that particular moment, no one fully understood exactly what God was saying, because that scripture that is quoted in Hebrews is lifted from Jeremiah. And Jeremiah prophesied during the fracas when now the Assyrians had begun attacking Israel. Actually, some people say by the time Jeremiah spoke that prophecy, the first batch of exiles, those who remember, was it 610 BC? Because the final one was 587 BC, somewhere around there. The first batch had already gone into exile. And through the prophet, God begins to say, I think I need to change strategy. I made a covenant with these people, and this covenant is not working as I purposed it to work. By the way, let me quote where the quotation is taken from, because if you go to Jeremiah, you will realize, Jeremiah 31, you will realize the language used is a bit different. And I want to show you something. That quotation in Hebrews is lifted from here. Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Next verse. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke. Meaning, God is lamenting, I had a covenant, now that covenant is broken. I need to do something. Of course, when a covenant is broken, the parties involved are no longer, how can I put this? They no longer have an obligation to fulfill whatever they had said, because someone, as in our language, breached the contract. So now the other party is free now to break away. And that's why God is saying they broke the covenant, though I was a husband to them. You see now there are statements here that are not in the quotation in Hebrews. Actually, the key thing is in verse 33, because there are things, the language used here is a bit different from what is used in Hebrews. This is a covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my law in their minds. I want you to look at that. The first covenant, now that was ratified by Moses, because remember, when you speak about Abraham, It was a covenant between him as a person and God. And then God said, your descendants after you, when they come, I will also make a covenant with them. So when we talk about the covenant of Israel, we are actually referring to that moment when Moses brought them to Mount Sinai, and then the Bible says he read the letter of the law to them, then took blood and sprinkled and said, this is the blood of the covenant that God has made with you. And from that time, what had been promised to Abraham, that I'll make a covenant with your descendants, now becomes a national covenant. And we begin to talk about the covenant of God with Israel. Now he says, the way I will do it, I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Now, if you listen to what God was saying, the other covenant that he had made has been made obsolete because of disobedience. Now, he is promising, for me to continue to bless these people, to do what I was supposed to do, we need, let me use language that is now clearly understood by us. We need to renegotiate again, because we agreed there on Mount Sinai, you are broken. Although, like he says, I was like a husband to you. I was faithful. I stayed true to my word. You broke your part. Now, because I still want to continue being your God, we need to renegotiate. And because I am the God, I'm the one initiating, I will make a new covenant. When Jeremiah said those words, no one fully understood exactly what Jeremiah was talking about. Remember, much of what the prophet said, and that's why the New Testament says, many of the prophets looked forward to the things they prophesied, because even they didn't understand what they were saying. And by the way, although that is a bit not to the core of what I'm saying, we need to understand part of what should encourage you is to realize that we serve a God who is faithful to do what he promised, even when people don't understand. Praise the name of the Lord. I mean, even Jeremiah never fully understood what he was saying. I mean, he was prophesying, and then, what have I just said? What does it mean to make a new covenant? Will God take us back to Mount Sinai? Will there be another Moses? And then they would connect with what Moses had said. The Lord shall raise a prophet like me. And that's why whatever we refer to as the messianic expectation of the Jews, that's why it was it was a bit confusing, because they had so much to rely upon, and they could not fully understand what kind of man they were waiting for. Because when you put all the scriptures together, and to us a son is born, and they begin to ask, how shall this man be? Then he shall deliver his people. Then Moses said, a prophet like me. Then many other things that are in Isaiah, the suffering servant and things like that. They did not have a complete picture of exactly how Jesus would be like and how he would come. Nevertheless, he still came. And that's why, as long as we keep following this God, we need to rest in our hearts. God is faithful to fulfill that which he promised. Through the prophet, he said, it shall come to pass that I will make a new covenant with Israel. They kept on waiting. Maybe next year. Maybe the coming month. Maybe, by this time next year, the Messiah, that new covenant will be. And then, that's why I started the preaching today with Matthew. One night, out of nowhere, in as far as the Jewish nation was concerned, and particularly to the 12 men who were gathered in that room, Jesus takes a cup. This was during the celebration of something the Jews knew very well, the Passover, where they would gather, break bread together, remembering how God had taken them out of Egypt. Remember, I read 2 scriptures and I want you to keep them in mind. Remember, even in Hebrews, the Bible says, like the covenant I made with them when I took them by hand out of Egypt. So the Passover was a time to remember certain things that God had done. Every time, during that time of the year, every head of a family would gather his people together, because I want you to get where Jesus is coming from. Then he would break bread, unleavened bread, and then distribute to his family. Then they would have the lamb, the Passover lamb that had been set aside and then roasted. No, you remember the details of the Passover. Then the bitter herbs that would accompany that to remind them of the bitterness of their bondage. And then, after the meal, there would be a cup. That is now the cup of wine. That's why Jesus and Paul later says, after the supper, Jesus took the cup. When you say that to the Jew, they knew what they were talking about. I'm saying these things so that you don't get lost and begin to wonder, how would Jesus out of nowhere do crazy things like this? No. What Jesus was doing was being done in every family in Israel at that particular moment. It's only that he did it, or rather when he was doing it, he said peculiar words. Every family was gathered this particular night. They were doing exactly what Jesus was doing. The head of the family would break bread and, pass it around. Then after the meal, he would take a cup of wine and then speak a blessing and say, now, this is what God gave to our fathers. And they would now take together, and the celebration would come to an end. But Jesus changed what he did, or rather how he did it that day. Instead of just doing it the normal way. And remember, Jesus had done this with his men at least 3 times. There's something I want you to get. Remember, Jesus called his men, or rather began his ministry at the age of 30. And we know he was here on earth doing ministry for around 3.5 years. You remember that? Even if you were not there, at least you remember that, right? So the previous year and the other year, he had done this. That's why, you remember, when they were preparing this, it is the disciples who came and asked Jesus, Master, where would you have us prepare this supper? Because this is something we have been doing. We know every night, every year, a night like tonight, we always gather together and do this. So where would you like us to do it this year? So it was not something strange. It was not something unusual. The only unusual part is the statement that Jesus made that night when he said, this cup now is my blood, rather, of the new covenant. Now, to the Jew, anyone talking about the covenant of God needed to be careful. By the way, I think I need to, anyway, because today we are laying the foundation, I have the liberty to be a bit broader. When you remember Paul talking about the Jews and the Gentiles, remember in Romans, he begins to now compare the two and begins to say, comes to a point and asks, so what is the advantage of the Jew against the Gentile? And then he says several. For one, to them belongs the what? The covenant. Because what set apart the Jew, when you put a Jew and a Gentile together, what set them apart is the fact that to the Jew, he knew we have a covenant. And for them, the mark of that covenant is now, or rather the sign, is what was given to Abraham as circumcision. And that's why God told Abraham, your descendants, the males, shall be circumcised as a sign that my covenant is with them. So, what gave the Jew pride is knowing I have a covenant that you people do not have. And that's why when Jesus said, I have, or rather this is my blood of the new covenant, he needed to be careful because it could be interpreted by the Jews he was talking to. Remember, even if you call them his disciples, they were still Jews. You remember how later Paul had a big quarrel with Peter because Paul is daring to take this covenant to the Gentiles. And to Peter, this covenant, salvation is of the Jews. Even Paul said that, because that is, the covenant is what guaranteed a relationship with God. So for Jesus to say, this is my blood of the new covenant, it must have shocked these guys out of their socks. I mean, if they wore any. Anyway, of course, you know that statement. I'm blessed out of my socks. Now, these guys knew there is a covenant. Jesus is talking about a new covenant, not with the blood of goats. Actually, he's saying, this wine that I am holding is a sign, is like it is representing my blood of the new covenant. If you go to how Paul presents it when he talks about what we call the institution of the supper, the language is changed a bit. He says after the supper, Jesus took the cup and blessed and taught his men, this is the cup of this is the blood of the new covenant, take and drink it. And from there, now, these men began to look at that night as the night that Jesus instituted what Prophet Jeremiah had talked about. Now, the writer to the Hebrews later picks on this and begins to show, because he's writing to the Jews, that what Jesus did was not unusual. Jesus did what God had promised. That's why he's telling them, God had already said, I will make a new covenant with the nation of Israel, or rather with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. And now, because Hebrews was written to convince the Jewish people that actually Jesus is the promised Messiah. And that's why it takes a lot from the Old Testament and points to Jesus as the fulfillment of that. So he begins to show them, God had said, I'll make a new covenant. So when Jesus said, this is my blood of the new covenant, Jesus is not outside Scripture. Jesus is fulfilling something that was promised, and therefore, he begins to show them, that is now Hebrews, that you need to accept this new covenant as the renegotiated pact that the same God of our fathers has brought to us. And then he begins to quote from Jeremiah how that covenant would look like. I will come back to that later. And then concludes that chapter by saying, now, if God is talking about a new covenant, then we need to understand, we need to agree that then it means the first covenant must be done away with. Of course, when we talk legally, the moment we, promulgated the new constitution in 2010, the other constitution became obsolete. You cannot have two documents that are binding, right? So, the writer is telling these men, the Jewish people, the moment God said he has a new covenant, then you cannot have two covenants. You either choose to work with the old covenant, or you choose now to work with the new covenant. And that's why the heading today is Understanding the New Covenant. And there is a reason. Of course, those of you who have followed on our page, that's what I've been posting the last few days, because I realized we need to enlighten ourselves one more time about the working of this new covenant. We cannot keep talking about ourselves being the New Testament church. Testament is just another word for covenant, and yet we do not even understand that New Testament, that new covenant that Jesus himself said, this is my blood of the new covenant. Meaning, we have shifted from the old covenant. And that's why the writer here is saying very clearly, the moment God spoke about a new covenant, it means the old covenant is no longer working. The problem is this. Many people, because they have not understood, they have not made the transition to the new, they are living in this age of the new covenant, but still living according to the dictates of the old covenant. And when you begin to try to have both covenants work for you, Of course, that's why now the writer is saying he has made the first obsolete. And what is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to vanish away. And that should be the reality in your life, that now I am a New Testament believer. In as much as we come from that tradition where we have followed what God has done since Adam, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, and the rest all the way, we need to understand there is a point where Jesus drew the line and said, this is my blood of the new covenant. Meaning, there is something that is starting tonight that is going to change the way God relates with people, because even before that night, God was relating with people on the basis of a certain covenant. His people were Israel, of course. Now, in the new covenant or new dispensation, there must be a new covenant to guide how God is going to relate with his people. And that's what I want to show you today. Because until you understand that, you will be a New Testament person who is living in the Old Testament. And that's the problem of many people. Our experience, our confession is New Testament, but our living, our experience is more of the Old Covenant. And that's where now people begin to feel it's like there is a disconnect between what the Bible says should be happening to me and what is actually happening. Now, let me just take you quickly through what Jeremiah had said. Now take me back to verse 8. I want to show you the things that were highlighted there to show you how now this new covenant says, or rather what this new covenant brings on the table. The first thing he said in verse 8, I will make a new covenant. So, let's start from there. God still promised a new covenant. Remember we said God is a covenant or a working and covenant-keeping God. Why am I saying we need to start there? Our walk with God is a covenant walk. And to understand that, you just need to look at the first covenant. When Moses brought the people to the mountain, he was given the 2 tablets of stone with the laws that God gave. Then he read the whole law, not just the 10 commandments, but all the law to the people. Then the people said, all what God has said, we shall obey. Then the Bible says he took blood, sprinkled it 7 times to the people, and sprinkled it on the parchment, or rather on the stone, the tablet, and then said to the people, be careful, because this blood that now I have sprinkled upon you is the blood of the covenant that God has made with you. And he told them, from today, God is your God. You have covenanted. You have given a solemn vow. God will be your God. And on his part, God has said, you will be his people. And that's where, from that point, that's when God begins, like what we read in Jeremiah, to say, I was like a husband to them, because that is the shadow they could very easily understand is the issue of marriage, where people make a covenant to live together. And by the way, it's good to chase rabbits on the way. You have seen now the current movement of your generation, because definitely that is not my generation. It is your generation that is protesting anything to do with the vows. Let me tell you the truth, point blank. It is because you don't want commitment. Hello? Why would you want? I don't want to commit. I don't want to swear. I don't want. Why can't we just live together? So what are you planning to do? Why are you afraid of giving a promise before God, before people, and sign on a document so that even the government can tell you where ni bibia yule mtu? Do you know why you don't want that? This generation does not like that. It is because it is a generation that is not planning to keep the covenant. So they don't want anything that may bind them in the future. So come we stay, so that if it becomes hard, come we go. Because where there is a covenant, then you begin to realize, I cannot wake up one morning and decide I no longer love you. I will have to go back to the law. I will have to go to court and obtain what is called a divorce decree. That may take years before you process it before a lawyer. And then after that, we need to go to the same court and share property and things. And that's what your generation does not want. But let me tell you, anyone who understands God understands the basic thing. God is a covenant God. He doesn't like casual relationships. Hello? If I don't like, nakufil, sikufil, no. There must be a covenant. And it was made with blood. The reason why they used blood is so that that blood, actually, even in the Old Testament, that covenant was made with blood of an animal, because now you didn't want to kill yourself, so you would kill an animal. But the significance, the reason why it was sprinkled was when that blood is touching you, you are saying, if I break the pact, if I don't keep my end of the bargain, may I die like this animal that has died to bind us together. And that's why Moses told them, be careful. This blood I am sprinkling upon you is the blood of the covenant that you have made with God. Should you break your end of the bargain, the same fate that befell this animal is going to befall you. That's why when we talk about sin, the wages of sin is death, because there must be a covenant. A covenant speaks about a commitment where there are consequences for either party if you break. Of course, when we put it like that, you are like, there be a consequence on the side of God. That's why we now talk of matters like intercession, going to God with boldness. You promised. You get that? By the way, when you understand covenant, you realize it's not that bad unless you are a covenant breaker. Because it gives you the basis to go back to God. God, you promised that you would do A, B, C, D. Why have you not done it? Because if you have broken your part of the covenant, then that makes you a bad God. And that's why at the end of the day, it now gives you, the Bible says now we have boldness to approach God. Why? Because there is a covenant. In the absence of that covenant, none of us, the two parties, that is us or God on the other side, none can be held accountable. We need to realize when Jesus said this blood is the blood of the new covenant, he went ahead and told the people that were the first to enter that covenant, the 12 men with him. He told them, take this, drink it. And then he told them, as often as you drink this, because you'll need to remind yourselves. That's why we talk of Holy Communion, or Eucharist, or whatever, from whatever background you are coming from, the Lord's table. But there needed to be a point in time where those involved, because God is on his side already, those involved must have come into covenant with God. And this is where now many believers get it wrong, because the fact that you grew up in a religious upbringing, you were born and brought up by a church-going people, your parents used to go to church, so you grew up knowing the Christian language. You grew up understanding what it means to say, praise the Lord again. You grew up in that environment. But until you have ratified, because that is the legal terminology, the covenant, then you have no right to any of the promises contained in the covenant. That's why now we begin to talk about God, or rather now in the New Testament, people making a personal decision. God stood and said through Jesus, this is my blood of the new covenant. And he made an invitation. Anyone who wants a covenant now needs to come and enter into a covenant. So we need to understand God worked with Israel on the basis of a covenant. In our generation, he is still working with people on the basis of a new covenant. So the covenant part is still there. That's the point I wanted you to see. When God said, I'll make a new covenant, it's not like he was saying, I think I have seen covenants don't work. So let me forget about the covenant. Let me begin to deal with them just casually. No, he said, I will make what? A new covenant. For them, it was the covenant that Moses had, together with Israel, had agreed to, and they walked in accordance with that. And then, because it was carried over from what Abraham had negotiated with God, or rather what God had told Abraham, they carried circumcision as a mark. And that's why to the Jew, on the 8th day, the male was circumcised to show outwardly that now this person, this man, has become part of the covenant personally. They have become part of the covenant, because until you were circumcised, you were considered as someone outside the covenant. That circumcision, according to what Paul says now, in the New Testament, is no longer outward. He begins to talk about now the circumcision of the heart. Whatever he is talking about, because he's talking to the Jewish people, it still goes back to this one thing. There is a covenant. A covenant means there are agreements, there are clauses. I mean, anyone who has ever signed a legal document, you know you have to sign to so many things, and you keep on asking, is it really necessary? When it comes to covenants, it is necessary, because you don't want anyone getting out of the covenant later, what now in law they call a lacuna in the law, where there is a loophole, someone can fail to do what they said, and they say, I have not broken the contract. So sometimes, that's why they keep on telling you, the devil is in the details. Never sign something you have not read. By the way, let me say this slowly. The first time we began cooking in our rooms here, you know, it was unheard of. So that semester, we began cooking, and it brought a big crisis. So the next semester, when we came back to college, we were supposed to sign that you will not cook. Let me tell you, you know me, I'm serious when it comes to matters covenants. I read that document, and I returned it and signed, because I was planning to cook. Come rain, come shine. But I didn't want to sign and say I am committing that I will not cook in my room, because it had several things, that I will not have a stove, I will not have the electric thing, I will not cook, and you sign. I returned the document and signed. I was clever enough to know, mukinishika baadaye, nitawaambia mchomoa hiyo. Niwaambie mimi siku sign. Anyway, but I want you to understand, the same way when you sign documents, legal documents, there are clauses. You are signing, you are ratifying certain things. It is the same thing when it comes to God dealing with us now, because he did not say, when Jesus comes, forget about commitments. He said, I'll make a what? A new covenant. So we have a covenant. The same way the Jews used to say, we are the covenant people, we in the New Testament can comfortably say, we are the covenant people. Why? Because there is a new covenant. When they talk about the covenant as Jews, they are talking about the covenant with Moses. We are talking about the covenant that Jesus said, this is the new covenant in my blood. So forget about casual, engagements with God. There is a covenant. He was so serious about it, he died on the cross. Why would you take it that casually? And that is why, even as we continue walking with him, it is on the basis of a certain thing that is called the new covenant. Anyone, any party breaking a covenant must face the consequences. And that's why, of course, we know God will not break on his part. The question is, how am I working to keep my end of the deal in the new covenant that I have entered into with God. So don't keep saying that we are not, there's no covenant. The covenant belongs to the Old Testament. There is a new covenant, and you need to ratify at a personal level. To the Jew, you needed to be circumcised on the 8th day. To us, you need to make a personal commitment. There's nothing like family or national. You know, you meet people telling you that this nation is Christian. This nation is Muslim. This nation, there's nothing like that. It is made up of Christians. It is made up of Muslims. But you cannot have, when it comes to a relationship with God, you cannot have a national thing. Kenya, as Christians, Kenya is not a Christian nation. If it was a Christian nation, we wouldn't even be talking about referendum and the hustler and all this other nonsense. Yes, it is nonsense. By the way, let me speak to the politicians. The fact that I don't support BBI does not mean I support hustler. I can support neither. Or is it neither? I can decide I'm not on either side because none of them is offering a solution to this country. We need to wake up to realize that there are matters, that have been there with us for so long, and the solution is not as cheap as the politicians want us to believe. For starters, if all of us agreed to live by what the Bible says, we wouldn't need all these other issues because we would already love our neighbor as we love ourselves. So we wouldn't need to hurt them. We wouldn't need a law. We wouldn't need a law to guide us not to hurt our brothers. Anyway, when you come here, politician, we shall tell you that. But you can pick it from here, even today. Praise the Lord. There is a covenant, a new covenant. Now, number 2, that covenant, take me back to Hebrews, because I need you to see why. Verse 9. Now, the second thing he says, the new covenant is not according to the other covenant. So, this covenant is different. That is the second thing you need to realize. God already acknowledges, I made a covenant. I am not denying. I am not saying there was never a covenant. There was a covenant. But the way we did it, that's why he's saying, the one I want to make now will not be on the same basis. I need to make it in a different way. Why am I adding that? If we begin to keenly examine what the old covenant says, then we can very easily, and that's where now some of the confusion comes into, we can forget that God said the new covenant will not be exactly like the other one. It is not, I'll make a covenant not according to the other one, because I think there was something wrong in the whole setup. The covenant itself, of course now Hebrews explains it better. The new covenant is based on better promises, a better priesthood, a better blood, better everything. But just for the sake of not going to too many details, he said not according to the other covenant, meaning there was a different, it was supposed to be in a different way. And as we continue, you'll begin to see why he said it would be different, or rather, it would not be like the other covenant, because he says which covenant they broke. By the way, and that's the argument of Hebrews. If Israel had kept the first covenant as God had said to them, he wouldn't need to bring in a new covenant. And that, by the way, that's the argument of the book of Hebrews. He comes to a point and said, definitely, if that other covenant had worked, God would not speak about a new covenant. Why bring something new if the old one is working well? And that is the argument of the book of Hebrews. We need to realize Israel broke that covenant, and God decided to usher in a new covenant on different terms. Let me just use that language. Meaning, if you were now to follow, and that's where now some of the cults fall, because they want to follow what Israel did without realizing it never worked for them. Actually, Paul, a Jew, says, when he was arguing with the King Peter, we who are the Jews, we know this thing has not helped us. Why are you expecting it to help the Gentiles? Maybe we never read that statement because we are busy wanting to become Jews when it never worked for them. And God had to make a new covenant. So now we want to do things their way, put on even the have you realized now the craze that has come with especially in the Kenyan church, of even wearing the prayer shawl? You know the shawl that is used by Jews when they go to the Wailing Wall. Now, we want to go back to what never worked. What the Bible is saying, obsolete. We want now to, on the same basis, we want to put on a prayer shawl bought in Israel and drink water from River Jordan. Even if you go to Mount Sinai, where Moses stood and they fetch water from there, it's not going to help you. It never helped them. That's why Hebrews is very clear. If that old covenant had worked, God would have no need for another covenant. The fact that he's saying, I need another one, should tell you, then I should also forget about the other one, because even God is seeing it never worked. But are you seeing the language? Look at this. Verse what? Give me verse 10. Not verse 10. Let me get that. Because God is saying the reason why I want a new covenant is because something happened. Actually, what I've been quoting is in verse 7. If the first covenant had been faultless, then no place would have been sought for a second. Then he says, verse 9, not such a covenant, according to this translation, as I made with their fathers when I took them out of the land of Egypt, for they did not abide. In Jeremiah, another translation says, not like the covenant I made with them, which they broke. Meaning, God is saying, by the way, that agreement is null and void. Why? Because we were two parties. One party, that is the nation of Israel, they broke. Look at this. My covenant, which they broke. When a covenant is broken, then neither party is bound by now the terms and whatever that were in the covenant. So when we begin to want to take ourselves back to what already was broken, and that God is now saying, I need to make a new one, then we are putting ourselves in a precarious position. You are, it's like now, constitutionally speaking, saying, I refuse to be governed by the new constitution. By the way, you remember even after some time, the lawyers began to remind the people, we need to stop referring to it as the new constitution. It is now the constitution. The first few months you needed to say that because there was still, remember those things that were called the transitional clauses, where they understood there is what is existing under the old constitution, there is a new constitutional dispensation, you need to overlap, you need now to cross over. The moment all the transitional things were in place, they started saying, stop talking about the new constitution. Start talking about the constitution, because now the other one is no longer there. Now, what I'm saying is, if now, as a Kenyan, you said, I do not recognize the constitution that is there. For us, it is the 2010 constitution. I want to live, I want to be governed by the other constitution. Of course, everyone would laugh you off because they know you are headed into big trouble, because nothing legally is going to be working for you. But how many of us want to be governed by the one that God says they broke? And I am not making a covenant on the basis of that, I am making a new. This is something completely new. It may carry some things over from the other dispensation, but still it is something completely new. Meaning, when we talk salvation, we are not talking of a modified Jewish way of life, if I may put it like that. No. Salvation is not a makeover. Making up, painting and making something. It is a new birth. Now let me begin to bring terminologies. We talk about if anyone be in Christ, he is a new what? He is not a better creature. He is a new creature. He is not a reformed creature. He is not a upgraded creature. He is not the newest update. He is a new, completely new creature. Actually, commentators say the best way to render that statement is there is a new creation. It's not just him being a new creature. Everything about that person, there is a new creation around him. Him, the heart, everything about him. There is a new creation. And that's why he's saying, not like the other covenant. We are not an improved version of the Old Testament. We are a new breed, completely new, on better promises, better blood, better everything, because this is something new. And he said, not like the other one. This is something that is going to be different. Praise the name of the Lord. Now, when he's saying it is going to be different, now listen to the things he begins to highlight that are going to be different. Verse 10, because now he begins to say, now, this is the covenant. This is how it will be. And now this is point 3. Now the covenant is in them, in their hearts, rather than on tablets of stone. I will explain that very long statement so that you get it. When Moses took the people to the mountain, the laws of God were written on tablets of stone, and that is what he sprinkled with blood. And then he sprinkled the blood on them, on the people. Now, Jesus, when he said, drink this, it was no longer on them. Of course, when you drink, it's now from within, right? Of course, what they were drinking was a sign. He had not yet died. He was giving them the wine and telling this is the blood that will be shed for you in a few hours' time. But then Hebrews says, I will put my laws in their mind and write them in their hearts. Some translations put it very clearly, I will now engrave my laws inside them. So that it is no longer about outward things. It is something that is coming from within. Now, the best way to explain this is to look at some of the things that now we relate to. I mean, we use things as shadows. If I live long enough, if I go to Uwi and live there for 5-10 years, I may actually speak the language there with a lot of fluency, right? I may learn their culture. Many of the things on the outward, I can dress like them, I can walk with them. I can even forget that I used to have sh and begin to have s, so that I say ceiling instead of shilling. And nianze kuongea na uzito kwenda huko, theirs ni kama inaendanga na waves, and they are talking, you feel like it's inaenda na waves kwenda huko. But from the inside, I will still not be a Luo. Right? Everything on the outside will look like I belong there. But from the inside, where the rubber meets the road, you remember in those days when people used to say, mimi ni kanu damu? They were saying, I have been in this thing long enough that even if you cut me, what will flow out of me is kanu. It's not something that is painted on the outside. Well, you may have your own opinion about them, why they would say that. But the point is this. God felt, and this is where he's saying, I'll make a different covenant. The other one, it was them doing things. But now, I want that law, I want to write it in their hearts. The end result is this. This person has the law, the will of God, working in him from within. Actually, now that explains why he said, no one shall teach their neighbor, saying, know the Lord. You know why? If already the law of God is in your heart, then it means there is something in you that makes you part of that God. And by the way, even when you look at some of the things now we talk about, there are things that are inbuilt, things that someone is born with. There are things that we can learn. At the end of the day, God wanted a situation in the new covenant where it would be working from within rather than from without. Now, that explains many of the New Testament statements where now Jesus, Paul, and more or less all the New Testament, they begin to talk about now God living in the inside. They begin to talk about your motives rather than what you are doing on the outside. Remember, the Pharisees were a very religious people. They kept, Paul said, according to the law, blameless, because he was a Pharisee. When he says that, he's telling you they followed to the dot everything written in the law. Actually, they were so careful that they actually counted the characters. So that when now he says, not even an iota of the law will fall. Iota is that dot you place of an I. You remember that, Kathleen? They counted the characters. I mean, even your computer has not gone to that extent. It tells you the number of words in your document. You know, when you are typing, it tells you this document has 3,000 words. It doesn't tell you the letters. The Pharisees counted to make sure they have not missed one character. To follow the law so strictly, they went to the extent, and Jesus even recognized that, they would tithe tea masala. I mean, herbs. They would count. Ukihesabu 10, 9 ni ya Mungu. But Jesus told them what? But you have neglected the weightier matters of the law. Actually, elsewhere he said, you are like tombs. On the outside, it is painted with whitewash, but inside it is still a tomb. It has bones, it has rotten flesh. Jesus was telling them, on the outward, you look okay, but in the inward, nothing is wrong, is right with you. Actually, he told them, you even travel for miles outside the country to make one disciple. But when you get him, you make him twice a child of hell, because, of course, the disciple will always go one step ahead of the teacher. So the disciples of the Pharisees were more wicked than the Pharisees. Yet, on the outside, they were the perfect religious people. They prayed, they fasted twice a week. I'm sure some of you have never fasted this year. These guys fasted twice a week. They wore their scriptures. I mean, but you know, they used to, because Moses had said, this book of the law shall not depart. Their garment would have now scriptures written, so that even as you wear, you can read where the law is telling you, don't hate this, don't do this and this. Because the Pharisees wanted to do it, when the Bible says, do not take it from before your eyes, and that's something Jesus quoted. That kofia of them, the tassel, instead of keeping it on the back, they would keep it here, and it would have scriptures. So literally when the person is walking, he is seeing through scriptures. He is seeing through the law, because the law is here. And the tradition was the bigger, the better. So some of them were actually walking blind because they have a wool page hanging here. Yet that law that is hanging, that is blinding him, is not in his heart. That's why he was saying, you pray long prayers to be seen. Yet after the prayers, you go and devour widows' houses. I mean, he was telling them, on the outward, everything seems to be okay. But inward, that law that you are keeping here is not in your heart. That is why now God said, this is the covenant I will make with them. I will write my law not in a tablet, but in their hearts. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road. How do you know you have really been converted? You have entered into the new covenant when what God says begin to work from within you. One of the statements about Spurgeon, those who know Charles Haddon Spurgeon, one of the greatest preachers of the last few centuries, he was always insisting on true conversion before he could allow anyone to join the church. So there was this lady who used to work for another family, and she, after some time, she came and told the pastor, I want to join the church. And the pastor told her, we need evidence that you are actually converted before we allow you. So what evidence do you have that you are now born again? And the lady said, for starters, because this thing happened last week. This week, I have swept under the carpet. And the pastor said, on the basis of that, we know you are converted. You know what the lady was saying? Before I got born again, where I am working, I used to sweep, and then all the trash, I sweep it under the carpet and cover it because no one saw. From the time I got converted, without anyone watching, I lift the carpet, I wash. Why? Because now the law is not on a piece of paper. You shall sweep the carpet. It is in my heart. Praise the name of the Lord. So what evidence do you have that you are in the new covenant? Since the day you say you met Jesus, what evidence? Do you have that sense that from that time, even me, I know from within me, something came over me, in quotes, and I find myself now walking in this direction without anyone following me. But we are a generation that will want to be followed every day, everywhere. And that's because of what Jesus was saying. It now eliminated the need for you to come and sit here when your body is seated here, but your mind is in Coco Savannah or Diana's. Because now, we have been brought up, you need to go to church on Sunday. Really? If your mind is not in church, don't bring your body to church. You need this thing to work from within. Now, when God begins to speak about things in the New Testament, you realize he now narrows more on what is inside. God loves not just a giver, a what? Cheerful. Meaning, if I am giving, but then my heart is feeling, then God is like, stay with your offering. This is the new covenant. The old covenant is where, whether you liked it or not, actually it was written for you. If you bring a child for dedication, this is what you are supposed to bring. There was no negotiation. Whether you feel like it or not, it is the law. Do you see us asking anyone to come with a dove or something like that? You come with what you feel in your heart. I just want to thank God with this offering that I have in my heart. When Jesus began to speak about matters of the new covenant and the old covenant, he kept on saying, you have heard that it was said. And he would refer to things that would speak about the outward. Do not commit adultery. Now I say to you, this is a new covenant. The law should be in your heart. If you look at someone and lust after them, you have already committed adultery. Why? Because the law is supposed to be in your heart. You are supposed to, from within, realize I should not be admiring people I am not married to. I should not, forget about looking at their pictures. I think we are too far. Even thinking about them. You have gone to the extent you even watch porn on your phone. And you are saying, I stay in my room the whole day. Yes. But what are you doing? Because according to you, I'm faithful. I've not gone anywhere. Yes. But if the law is in your heart, then it means I shouldn't be doing what God says. Actually, from within me, my life should have been transformed. That's why now Paul said, until Christ came, we were under a schoolmaster. But once grace comes, you are not supposed to be, no one is supposed to be following you. No one is supposed to be monitoring what you are doing. That's why I was telling you we need to understand the law, the new covenant. That idea of, when we were young, a certain church I know, because of issues of immorality among the youth, they came to a point and said, we will not proclaim ourselves on any wedding until after 9 months. And we were saying, nanikubaya, kama imefika hapo. You know what was happening is people are coming to church, they are getting married. 3 months later, a miracle baby. 4 months, 5 months. And of course, we know there was only one, it's only Mary who conceived miraculously. But let me tell you, it's good to pronounce myself on this. I'm your pastor, right? A marriage is supposed to start on a basis, on a platform of purity. Purity means you and the person you are marrying, you have not had any sexual relations, period. It's not about whether she is pregnant or not, because not everyone who is having sex is going to get pregnant. So even if we use that as the basis, tuangalie kama akona mimba, that is not going to help us. That is now working on the outside, because mimba ni kitu on the outside. These people can have been sleeping for 10 years and they'll never get pregnant. They know how to be clever. That does not make that wedding holy, my brother. What makes it holy is what God said, that it is on the basis of what? Purity. So we are not going to wait for you for 9 months. That is not our business. You should have the law of God in your heart, so that you know, even when I am dating, I am courting, I am still doing this on the understanding that God is expecting me to be pure. Sex is not sin. Did you hear what I said? It is fornication and adultery that is sin. Fornication is when two people who are not married to each other have sex. That is fornication. Adultery is when one of them is married to someone else. But sex is not sin. But as long as you have not been committed in marriage, in every aspect, that is legally. And that's why we say you need to do it in the right way. The right way in this generation means even the government knows you are married. Your parents know you are married. Your church knows you are married. And that's why we now do a wedding where we require you to go see the parents, whatever you agree, the parents of this side, the parents of this side. You get that certificate from the registrar. Then I come and join you wearing 2 hats. I am a registrar, registered, licensed actually, licensed by the government to join weddings. Once I sign that document, I am signing as a government officer. But then, that's why, have you realized when you go to church, long before he tells the couple to sign the document, he has declared them husband and wife. Why? Because he is acting also as a minister of God. That's why he said, I declare you husband and wife. Because as a minister, he has done that as a minister in the church. Now, he tells you, let's go and sign the government papers. Because that document is not a church document. That is a church. That is a government document. So until that is done, what you are doing is fornication. And I need to tell you this point blank. And you don't need anyone to monitor you. You know, certain churches came to the extent where even when people were dating, when a brother said he's engaged to a certain sister, they would not be allowed to meet anywhere unless there was a third party, and that would be a church elder. How many church elders do I have? Of course, that church was trying to respond to a problem, to a crisis. But in my opinion, that is not the way to go. The way to go is to tell people, to take them to what the new covenant Jesus brought to us. I will put my law in their hearts. I do not have enough soldiers, moral policemen to follow you when you are dating to see whether you kissed her or not. Because whatever you do, the thing is like our church is going to be ashamed. Really? What about your relationship with God? That is what should matter to you more than the image of the church. Praise the name of the Lord. Of course, the image of the church comes in because your face is considered the face of the church. We ni wa ile church. But long before we talk about that, what does God think about you? Because his law should be in your heart, not somewhere. Let's check whether there is a loophole so that we get out of this. No, the law is in your heart. So that even when no one is watching, God is watching. Let's stand on our feet. I will continue dealing with this matter because we need to fully understand what the New Testament actually entails. You cannot be governed by a document that you don't understand. And that's what we are doing, letting you know what this new covenant is about, what God has committed himself to, and what you, on the other hand, are supposed to commit yourself to. Just lift up your hands, speak to God. Let him help you to understand the new covenant. There is a new covenant. Jesus said this blood is the blood of the new covenant that I am going to make. And that covenant is a law written in our hearts. There is a new covenant. There is a new covenant. May you step into this. May your mind, spirit, soul, may you with everything you have shift from the old to the new, where God is on the other side and there is a covenant. There is a covenant. He is a covenant-keeping God, and he wants a covenant-keeping people.